My brother crashed my car and blamed it on Misso. I replaced the dashcam, showed the police, and watched him cry in court. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and if there's one label I've worn my whole life, it's the responsible one. The one who keeps his head down, works hard, never complains. My older brother Jake, he's been the family's golden boy since the day he was born, 2 years older. Smoother with words, a master manipulator wrapped in charm. If he lied, it was just a misunderstanding. If I made a mistake, it was how could you let this happen? Jake could wreck the car, skip rent, drop out of school 3 times, and still get a warm smile and a "we believe in you" speech. Meanwhile, I got lectured for coming home 5 minutes late from my shift. I worked 2 jobs through college late-night pizza deliveries and weekend. Retail just to afford my own used Honda Civic. That car was my freedom, my reward, my proof that I could stand on my own without anyone's help. Jake, he didn't even have a license for 2 years because he forgot to pay a ticket and let it lapse. When he finally did get a car, he blew the engine street racing with his friends. My parents helped him buy another one. And when that one got totaled in a DUI, his second, by the way, they said, he's just going through a phase. I should have drawn the line ages ago, but I didn't, because no matter how twisted things were, I still believed that one day Jake would change, that one day our parents would finally see the difference between us. I thought maybe if I just stayed patient, loyal, helpful, it would finally pay off. It didn't instead. It led to the moment where he took something that mattered more than anything and almost destroyed my life with it. It started with a knock at my door on a rainy Friday morning. Jake stood there, soaked hoodie clinging to him, flashing that familiar crooked grin to one he always wore when he wanted something. "Hey man," he said, voice casual like we were best friends. "I got this huge job interview today, and my car's in the shop. Any chance I could borrow yours for a couple hours?" I hesitated. My first instinct was to say no, but then I saw Ita's eyes, wide and hopeful, and just behind them, that flicker of calculation. Before I could answer, he added, "Please, this could really turn things around for me." And then came the final blow. You know, Mom and Dad would want us to help each other out. I should have listened to my gut, but I didn't. I handed him the keys, told him to be careful, and watched him drive off with the one thing I worked my ass off to earn. My Civic wasn't flashy, but I kept it in perfect shape. I had just paid for new brakes, an oil change, and even installed a new Dashcam, a little DIY project I was proud of. I didn't mention it to Jake. It didn't seem important. I went back inside, made coffee, and tried to focus on work, telling myself it was just a car and just a few hours. But something felt off, like I had handed a matchbook to a guy standing in gasoline. I told myself he'd be back by lunch, that he'd thank me, that maybe he'd prove me wrong this time. But by the time my phone rang, my stomach was already sinking, and when I saw it was an unknown number from the police department, I knew this wasn't just about a car anymore. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Is this the owner of a gray 2013 Honda Civic?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, that's mine." The officer paused, then said words I'll never forget. "Your vehicle has been involved in a hit. We need you to come down to the station for questioning." My heart dropped into my stomach. Wait, what? My brother was driving. His name's Jake, but the officer cut me off. "Sir, we've already spoken to your brother. He says you were driving." I don't remember the drive to the station. Just white knuckles on the steering wheel and my brain spinning in circles. Had there been a mistake? Had Jake panicked and said something stupid? Or worse, was this intentional? When I walked into the lobby, I saw him sitting on a bench, scrolling through his phone like this was no big deal. I froze. Our eyes met for a split second. Then he looked away. The officer led me into a small room. "Your brother claims you borrowed the car back for a quick errand and that you fled the scene after hitting a parked vehicle." "No, I never got the car back. He was driving it all morning." I was almost shouting. "Check the dashcam." The officer raised an eyebrow. He said you removed the footage before returning the car to him. I stared at him. My mouth went dry. I felt the floor tilt under me when my parents arrived 10 minutes later. I thought, finally someone to back me up. But the second my mom hugged Jake and whispered, "Are you okay, baby?" I realized I was completely alone. and I hadn't even seen what he'd done to the car yet. The first time I saw my car after the crash, I wanted to throw up. The front bumper was crushed in, the left headlight shattered, and deep gashes ran along the side panel like claw marks. It didn't just look wrecked, it looked violated. My car wasn't just transportation. It was my symbol of independence. My reward for years of working late nights, saving every dollar, saying no to vacations and nights out. And now it looked like Jake stood next to it like nothing happened. Arms crossed, voice steady, telling the officer again he said he needed it back around noon. I gave him the keys, and next thing I know, the cops are calling me. My head whipped toward him. You're lying. I never got the car back. The officer looked between us, clearly annoyed. We'll need both your statements on record. Before I could respond, my dad stepped in. Can we handle this as a family? This doesn't need to get legal. I expected support. Instead, I got betrayal served on a silver platter. Dad pulled me aside, jaw clenched. Just admit it, son. Take the blame. It's your word against his. This will go away faster if you just man up. I blinked at him. You really think I did this? His eyes didn't waver. Jake's already messed up enough. You're the responsible one. We can't afford to have you both in trouble. That sentence hit harder than any crash ever could. He's already messed up enough, meaning I should carry the load. Again, I looked at Jake, who shrugged like this was all just a nuisance. I felt something in me twist. Not break, twist, harden. But I still had one truth they didn't know about, and it was sitting quietly under the passenger seat. When we got home that night, I thought maybe they'd cool off, see how insane it all sounded. Instead, I walked into a full-blown family tribunal. Jake sat on the couch with an ice pack on his wrist, like he was the victim. Mom was pacing, red-eyed. Dad stood with his arms folded like he was waiting for a confession. No one offered me a seat. Let's just talk this out, Mom started, but her voice was already cracking. Your father and I are deeply disappointed. We know this isn't like you, but we think something's been off lately. Off? I echoed. Are you serious right now? I didn't touch the car. I gave it to Jake. That's it. Jake spoke up then, calm as ever. Maybe you don't remember. Man, you looked pretty tired that morning. Maybe you went out for something and blacked out. It happens. It took me a second to even process what he was suggesting. You'd think I blacked out, crashed my own car, and then just forgot. Dad cut in. We're not blaming you, son. We're just saying, if something happened, you need to own it. I felt the walls closing in. I wasn't just being doubted, I was being rewritten, gaslit in real time by my entire family. They were choosing Jake's lie over my truth because it was easier. I stood there, stunned, until Mom placed a hand on my shoulder and said, We'll help you through this. Just admit it. Be the bigger person. I pulled away. In that moment, I realized I was alone in a house full of people who would burn me at the stake to keep their golden child warm. But I wasn't going down with his lie, because they had no idea what was quietly recording under the seat of that car. I waited until they were all asleep. Every nerve in my body was buzzing, like I was walking a wire between fury and heartbreak. I slipped out to the driveway with a flashlight and unlocked the passenger door. The Civic sat there, bruised and silent, like it had been through war. I climbed in and reached under the passenger seat, heart pounding, fingers brushing against the cold metal edge of the device I hadn't told anyone about, my backup dashcam. A second cam I installed months ago after a neighbor clipped my bumper and lied about it. I'd wired it under the seat, out of sight, out of mind. Jake had no idea it even existed. He thought he'd deleted everything. I plugged the SD card into my laptop, praying the crash didn't corrupt the footage. For a second, the screen stayed black. A shaky view from the floor of the car lit up my room. There he was, Jake, driving my car, texting while steering, music blasting. Then, the moment he turned sharply onto a narrow street, looked down at his phone, and boom metal crunching. A scream from outside, and him muttering, "Shit, OFCK." He jumped out, looked around in panic, then ran back to the car and sped off. It even picked up his voice saying, "Dad's gonna F*** King, kill me." I sat there frozen, watching it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Every word, every second, was a nail in the coffin of his lie. This wasn't just proof. This was truth unfiltered, raw, undeniable. I backed up the footage to 3 hard drives and emailed it to myself and a lawyer friend, just in case. And as I stared at the paused frame of Jake's panicked face, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next morning, I didn't say a word. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, while Jake swaggered in like a man who got away with murder. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "You sleep okay, little bro? You seemed stressed last night?" I didn't respond. I just watched him. I wanted to see if guilt would flicker across his face, if even one drop of shame existed in him. He actually thought he'd won. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled with the investigating officer. I transferred the Dashcam files to a secure USB and made 3 copies, one for the police, one for backup, and one I planned to hand-deliver with receipts. I printed out the timestamps, mapped the route he took, and even highlighted his comments in the audio. The cursing, the panic, the guilt. My hands shook as I packed everything, but not from fear, from clarity. When I walked into the precinct and met the officer, I said calmly, "I have footage that proves I wasn't driving, and that my brother lied to you." He raised an eyebrow but took the USB and plugged it in right there at his desk. We both watched Jake fumble through the wreck, panic, and flee. The officer's face changed, his posture stiffened. "You're sure he didn't know this camera existed?" "Positive," I said. "He thought he wiped the only footage." He nodded slowly. "This changes everything." As I left the station, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not revenge. Validation. For the first time. I wasn't just defending myself. I was holding the truth in my hands, but I had no idea. Jake was about to make it so much worse. 2 days later, I got a knock at my door, only this time. It wasn't Jake. It was a pair of officers holding a clipboard and a folded document. One of them said, "We've been asked to deliver a report filed by your brother, Jake. He's alleging digital tampering and falsified evidence. We'll need to collect the original Dashcam for verification." I felt like I was being punched in the gut. He filed a police report against me for editing the footage. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so on brand. Jake couldn't talk his way out, so now he was trying to twist the truth again after they left. I checked my phone. 20 missed calls from my parents, 8 from Jake, and 1 long text from Mom that said, "How could you do this to your own brother? You need help. We raised you better than this." No one even asked for my side. Not once. Jake had convinced them I was out for blood, that I'd forged the video to destroy him because I was jealous of his success. Success. The guy hadn't held a steady job in years, but none of that mattered to them. They were circling the wagons around their golden boy again. I called the officer I met with earlier and told him everything. He sighed and said, "We already anticipated this. Don't worry, the metadata, timestamps, audio, everything checks out. If anything, this countersuit just proves intent." Still, I was rattled, because now it wasn't just about the accident. Jake was trying to paint me as unstable, obsessive, and dangerous. And worst of all, my own parents were helping him do it. From that point on, things moved fast. The detective handling the case called me in for a follow-up, but this time, he wasn't alone. A second officer from the tech unit joined us, already analyzing the Dashcam data. "We reviewed the footage," he said. "Everything matches. No signs of tampering. Your brother's countersuit won't hold." I should have felt relief, but all I could feel was exhaustion. I wasn't just fighting Jake. I was fighting an entire narrative built by my own family. One where I was always the quiet one, the stable one, the one they could load with all their mess and expect to carry it silently over the next week. The investigation pulled in more evidence. Traffic cams on the block caught my Civic the moment it sped from the crash. Sinjik, clearly visible behind the wheel. A nearby gas station had exterior footage showing him buying a soda 5 minutes after the accident. Even the other driver, the one Jake hit, gave a description that matched Jake's build, clothes, and voice. The case was becoming airtight. And suddenly, Jake wasn't so smug anymore. I started getting texts from him, first defensive, then panicked. "You need to chill. This is spiraling. Don't ruin both our lives over a car. Man." Then finally, "Please. I'll fix it. Just stop." I didn't answer any of them. What shook me the most, though, was a message from my aunt. Your mom's not eating. Your dad's furious. They say you're trying to send Jake to jail. Is that true? I stared at the screen, realizing that to them, the truth didn't matter. What mattered was protecting their golden son, even if it meant sacrificing the one who never asked for anything. The day the formal charges were filed against Jake hit and run, reckless endangerment, and filing a false report, I got a call from my mom, not to apologize, not to ask if I was okay, just a quiet, trembling voice that said, "How could you do this to your own brother?" I sat on the edge of my bed, phone to my ear, staring at the wall. He did it to himself. Mom. I gave him every chance to come clean. She sighed like she was the one betrayed. You used to be such a good son. Now you're just ... vindictive. Then Dad got on the line. His voice wasn't trembling, it was cold. You're dragging this family through hell. You think this is justice? You're a coward for going to the cops instead of handling this like a man. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just inconvenient to them, I was disposable. By nightfall, I was locked out of the family group chat. Every old photo of me on my mom's Facebook was gone. Dad emailed me saying I was no longer welcome in our home. Just like that Ty was excommunicated for telling the truth. I packed a duffel bag, left the house I grew up in, and crashed at a buddy's apartment on an air mattress next to his laundry pile. No family, no support. Just me, my laptop, and a folder full of evidence. For the first time in my life, I didn't have anyone checking on me. No dinner invites, no birthday texts, no Sunday morning calls. And yet, beneath all that pain, there was a strange clarity. This wasn't a fall from grace. This was the mask finally being ripped off, and if I had to burn the bridge to save myself, then let it burn. It felt surreal when the court papers arrived in the mail at my buddy's place. The name state versus Jacob Ellison printed in bold at the top. I just sat there staring at it, my hands trembling, not because I was nervous about testifying, but because this was real now. This wasn't a family drama or a misunderstanding. It was a criminal case. And Jake was about to face consequences for the first time in his life. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. I was the primary witness. The footage had been verified and entered into evidence. The police report had been updated to include his false statement. There would be no more gaslighting, no more he said. Just the facts, cold, hard, undeniable. Jake texted me that same night. Bro, come on. You really want to ruin my life over this? We're family. I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message. I didn't even want the satisfaction of replying. My parents didn't reach out, not directly. But I saw the posts on Facebook, cryptic quotes about forgiveness and loyalty. One even said, "You don't destroy your family to prove you were right." It stung. Not because I cared what strangers thought, but because I used to believe that, but now I knew the truth. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when truth costs something. I spent the next few days preparing. My lawyer coached me. I reviewed the footage again and again, not to relive it, but to remind myself why I couldn't back down. Because standing up for yourself isn't petty, it's necessary. And I wasn't walking into that courtroom to attack my brother. I was walking in to reclaim my name. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, just the atmosphere. Sterile, quiet, like a place where truth didn't scream. It just sat there, waiting to be heard. I wore the only suit I owned and sat by my attorney, hands clenched tight in my lap. Then the doors opened, and in walked Jake. He looked smaller than I remembered. No swagger, no grin. Just a pale face, twitchy eyes, and our parents walking behind him like bodyguards. My mom wouldn't even look at me. My dad's jaw was locked like a steel trap. Jake's lawyer tried to argue the footage was circumstantial and lacked full context, but the judge, thank God, wasn't buying it. He allowed the Dashcam video to be shown in full, audio and all. I didn't watch the screen. I watched Jake, watched his face twitch when he heard himself curse, watched his foot bounce when the crash sound echoed through the room, watched his eyes go glassy when he said, "Dad's gonna kill me." My mom gasped. My dad leaned forward. It was the first time they saw the truth in edit. UNSPUN. When the footage ended, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge spoke. There's clear evidence of reckless conduct and an attempt to mislead this court through false testimony. ordered that the case would proceed to trial, and had Jake taken into custody for further questioning. He was also charged with perjury on the spot. Jake started crying, like full-on sobbing, face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. I didn't move, not out of coldness, but because I'd already cried enough for both of us. That day, I wasn't his brother. I was his reckoning, as the bailiff cuffed him and let him out. He looked at me like I had betrayed him, but I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. After court, I didn't go home. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in my car for almost an hour, engine off, staring at my own reflection in the windshield, not smiling, not crying, just processing. The truth was out. Jake was finally facing consequences, but there was no applause, no justice parade. Just the silence of a life I could never return to. The news made local headlines the next day. Man cleared in hit and run after dashcam footage exposes brother's lie. It felt surreal seeing my name in print, but even more surreal, reading the comments. Some people praised me. Others said I should have kept it in the family. One person even wrote, "Snitch culture is ruining families." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. What hit harder were the calls and messages from extended family cousins I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly checking in. Some said they'd always known Jake was trouble. Others warned me that my parents were still furious. A few tried to play peacemakers, but not once did my parents reach out. Not a call, not a letter, not even a "we're disappointed" text. A cousin told me Jake had lost his job, was being sued by the other driver, and that his license was permanently suspended. I didn't feel joy, just a strange emptiness, like watching a house burn down that you knew had termites anyway. Meanwhile, I started picking up the pieces of my own life. I moved into a small rental apartment with a view of the train tracks. Not glamorous, but mine. I got back into therapy. Started sleeping through the night again. I even took my car in finally for a proper repair. The scars were still there. On the bumper. On me, but for the first time in years. They weren't being ignored, they were being healed. People still ask me, "Don't you regret taking it that far? Couldn't you have just forgiven him and moved on?" And I get it. To the outside world, this probably looks like some dramatic family fallout over a car. But it wasn't about the car. It was never about the car. It was about finally standing up to a lifetime of being the backup plan, the scapegoat, the emotional punching bag. I spent years being the one who understood, the one who let things slide, the one who was told, "You're stronger, just let it go." I was expected to carry grace like it was a duty. But grace without accountability isn't noble, it's survival. And I'm done surviving in silence. Jake made his choices. So did my parents. They weren't victims of my actions, they were architects of their own consequences. I didn't destroy our family. I just refused to be the glue holding together their lies. I've found a weird kind of peace in the aftermath. My world is smaller now, quieter, no chaotic group texts, no guilt-tripped family dinners. Just me, my work, my space, and people who show up because they want to, not because they feel entitled to. Jake's sentencing is coming up soon. I'm not attending. Not because I've forgiven him, but because that part of the story is no longer mine to carry. I already got my closure the day the truth played on at courtroom screen. I'm not angry anymore, just clear. And if I had to lose my entire family to find myself, then honestly, it was worth it. If you've ever grown up in the shadow of a golden child, I want you to hear this. You're not crazy. You're not difficult. You're not selfish for finally standing up for yourself. People like Jake, people who are allowed to fail upwards while you're expected to clean up the mess, don't. They exist everywhere. And so do the families that enable them. The ones who say things like, "He just needs a little help," while ignoring the fact that you've been helping your whole life quietly, consistently, without praise. I used to think love meant endurance. That the more you tolerated, the more loyal you were. But that's not love. That's self-erasure. Being the responsible one doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean sacrificing your peace to protect someone who wouldn't do the same for you. It doesn't mean swallowing lies just to keep the illusion of a happy family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, even if it shatters the image they've built around someone else, even if it makes you the villain in their story, even if it means standing alone. Because there's freedom in honesty. There's dignity in drawing a line. And there's power in saying, I will not be your cover-up anymore. If you're where I was, questioning your memory, your worth, your voice, you're the proof that they can't control everyone, and that's terrifying to them. I didn't go to Jake's sentencing. I didn't need to. My lawyer called me afterward and said he cried the whole time. Apparently, he gave a long, teary statement about how this had been the worst mistake of his life, how the pressure of always feeling compared to me made him reckless, how he panicked and didn't mean for it to go that far. But none of that mattered anymore, because while he cried in court, I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks away, sipping black coffee with my phone on silent. Not out of spite, out of peace, the kind of peace that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself to people who never listened in the first place. They say justice is loud sirens, judges gavels butt. In my case, it was quiet. It was a USB drive, a paused video frame, a moment where the truth simply stood up and refused to sit back down. Jake got 6 months probation, a revoked license, and mandatory community service. Some people said it was too light. Others said it was too harsh. But honestly, I didn't care, because consequences don't always come in prison sentences. Sometimes they come when the mask finally slips. When the golden boy cries and no one rushes to protect him anymore, I didn't cry when I heard the verdict. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done trying to earn a place in a family that only ever saw my silence as usefulness. Done shrinking myself to make others feel comfortable. Done carrying guilt that was never mine to begin with. If my story has a moral, it's this: let them cry. Let them spin their tales. But protect your peace like it's sacred, because sometimes the only justice you really need is never looking back.